Hey everybody, I'm here with Steve Coyne for the I believe this is the 18th episode of Martial Praxis podcast. I'm kind of losing track here. But really excited to have him on. He's been killing it as a strongman, doing lots of strongman competitions, doing an amazing job, and he puts out a lot of really great information as a coach, stuff about nutrition, hydration, uh, important like strength standards for being successful in strongman. So I wanted to have him on and pick his brain. So I really appreciate you doing this, man. Thanks for being here.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me, brother.
I've been. It's funny, like when I was really young, when I was like 12 and 13, my MMA coach had us do a lot of strongman stuff as our strength and conditioning. So we got a whole bunch of equipment off of like Atomic Athletic, which doesn't even exist anymore. I actually looked the other day and he's out of business. But we had Atlas stones and a log press and farmer's walk, and we would do tire flips. So we were doing all that stuff as our strength and conditioning. And I found that I felt like that really gave me an advantage over people from a martial arts standpoint. So I wanted to kind of get as much information from you as possible in terms of like how do we actually train these things? Because now I recently switched gyms. I'm at Mount Vernon Barbell now, which is a really really phenomenal gym in Mount Vernon, New York, that has a variety of equipment. So I now have access to like all the strongman equipment that I could possibly want. I mean, they have the Husafel stone. We got what do you call it? Like the iron cross, the thing you carry,
Oh, yeah.
sandbags, Atlas stones, log press, all this stuff. And one of the things that I've been kind of struggling with is like I for the last maybe 2 years I've been doing like really periodized, programmed out strength and conditioning work with like West Side Barbell approach, like sort of like centered around powerlifting, maybe with a little bit of bodybuilding influence. Um, but I'm like kind of struggling with the programming aspect of the stuff. Like it's like, okay, I'm gonna do sandbag carries. I'm like, how many do I do and for how long and like what you know what I mean? So like I'm wondering
Sure.
like how do you kind of approach that for your own training, and how would you recommend people break that down based off of like maybe what their goals are?
Sure. I think the best thing you can do is always have a long-term vision with what your ultimate goal is. So many people are so eager or excited to master everything and really be incredible at things right away, when in reality, you just have to think about like, well, what's the intention of this? It's like, well, I want to be, let's say, sandbag carries. Um, what's the right way to word this? I think you just have to set yourself up for a pattern of long-term progression so that you can continually advance forever. If you just go into the gym and you do a workout that absolutely kills you once a week, there's not really too many places that you can go from beyond that. Where let's
Yes.
say you go in and say, okay, I'm going to do a sandbag to shoulder today, and I'm going to do as many rounds or as many reps as I can in a minute. It's a really good thing to just say, well, now I'm going to do one more rep the following week and give myself 10 more seconds to do it. So even if you have like a really good gas tank for something, people coming from MMA, you could do 3 minute rounds, 5 minute rounds. You might be really well conditioned to that, but you want to be able to work up to that with a different modality. So by the time you're
Yeah.
5 minutes, like imagine how much strength and power and force you're going to be able to put out if you start gradually and just take that steady step, steady step, steady step. But it's also really important because that way you have all those like connective tissues, your nervous system, those things that take a little longer to recover. You're giving them the appropriate amount of timed progression so those recover as well. So your injury risk becomes a lot lower if you just have that long-term vision. I mean, 4 to 6 to 8 weeks or more is how you should
Yeah.
see how to progress things.
No, I hear some really good points in there. One thing that jumps out to me is like using the constraints of whatever it is you're trying to do. So like if you're trying to do MMA and it's a 5 minute round, then eventually like we're working up to hitting that sandbag carry. So like for me, like I guess like one of the ways I would look at this is like, let's say I'm doing like Chinese wrestling, which is a 3 minute round, right? And that might involve me lifting someone who is my body weight or slightly above my body weight, right? Like I want to be able to pick them up. So in that 3 minute round, I want to eventually, like my long term goal could be something like I want to pick up a sandbag that's my weight and be picking it up and shouldering it and then putting it back down continuously for 3 minutes, right? And that's like the long term goal. And then the way you're suggesting working towards that could be that start with 1 minute or 30 seconds or maybe a minute because it takes a little while to shoulder a heavy sandbag. But so you start with a minute and just try to do as many reps as you can in that minute, and then you add a little bit of time the next time and see if you can do one or two more reps.
Yes, or the other method that I really like, which is called density training, is take a longer period of time. You can say 5 minutes and max reps in that time. But again, I think it's important to undershoot and give yourself room to improve every week. So if you have a five
Yeah.
minute period, let's say you get to 8, but you're pretty certain you could do 12, that's actually where you kind of want to end up. So that
Yes.
next week you can do 9, the following week you can do 10. And that way, over 2 months, you'll be able to do 15, 16, 17, instead of
Yeah,
again.
you leave some reps in reserve so that the fatigue and the fatigue doesn't kind of add up across multiple workouts, right? Like you're not trying to.
Right.
It's similar to the periodization you get with like barbell work. Like you're not always maxing out.
You very rarely want to truly max out.
Yeah.
And I would say max out with weights because there's different ways that you can. Some people that I train are so addicted to wanting to max all the time, but
Yeah.
mindset shift, you can max out in different ways. That's a lot safer.
Yeah, that's something else I was going to ask you about is like what about working the other direction? Like let's say I can't like I was playing around with a 226 pound sandbag the other day, which was is about 10 pounds more than my body weight right now. And I was able to I was doing like isometric bear hugs, like trying to just like pick it up and then just like crush it. Um, and I did two of them for 30 seconds. And then the third time, like I couldn't even get the damn thing off the floor. Right. Like I was just like shot. And so I was like thinking, like I was like, could we also work the other way with like let's say I figure out what weight of sandbag I can do that continuously for 3 minutes with, right? So like pick it up for 30 seconds, drop it, pick it up again for 30 seconds, drop it, right? So like maybe it's 130 pounds or 150 or 170 pounds, and then do that for 3 minutes on some workouts, and then other workouts work the way you were saying. Like, would you ever take like a both ends in approach, or do you think you risk too much fatigue that way?
No, that's actually I think a way to mitigate fatigue. Because what really starts to wear you down is a lot of time under tension with very heavy stuff, because that's
Yeah,
your nervous system is going to get more affected when you do lighter things. That's going to be much more muscular and like your cardio capacities. So I did a seminar for the yoke carry, and that's typically very, very heavy. That's a full body, head to toe. It's weight that you're carrying on your back. You have to be braced across your entire system. But when you are training that, the best approach is to alternate heavy and light weeks. So
yeah,
not just like always under that heavy load. So when we're talking about things like sandbags, or people do this with sleds, or really anything, it works really well to alternate, heavy, light, heavy, light, heavy, light, or even if you're doing like a big strongman competition prep, or you just want to work multiple things, you could set up a cycle where it's like every 3 weeks, you're rotating. Week 1 is, let's say, sandbag to shoulder. Week 2 is I'm working the yokes. Week 3, I'm working farmer's carry. And then you could do all of those real heavy and then just keep running through, running through, running through. So
yeah.
you
So you hit that variability element. Like it's like you're gonna push really hard on the yoke this week and do everything else lighter, and then you push really hard on the sandbag the next week, and everything else is a bit lighter. Is that's kind of what you're saying?
right, right. And that way, that's enough. Again, thinking long term. Let's say you did that for 12 weeks. You get 4 very high quality rounds on heavy work of each of those, without having to overload everything else you're doing.
That makes perfect sense. And then also like it's interesting because with strongman, and I think this actually is nice because it replicates sport in some ways, obviously combat sport, but other sports too. Is that like the getting the weight up isn't the only factor, right? So like let's say you're doing yoke. Generally, yoke is like for a certain distance and it's timed, right? So
Right.
if you never do a lighter yoke, you'll never get used to moving faster with it, right? So that's
Correct.
part of the argument for doing that. Those lighter days with the yoke is like now you're teaching your body how to take a weight that's not the same as the max that you're going to do, but you're teaching yourself how to move quickly with it. And then now you're exposing yourself to that speed, and then you go back to the heavier weight, and maybe you're able to, maybe there's some transfer back and forth between moving quicker with a lighter weight and moving slower with a heavier weight. So eventually you're moving a little bit faster with the heavier weight.
Right. And then also too in competitions, there's always, or just gym to gym, all yokes are a little different. So, let's say 700 may feel this way on your home gym yoke, but then when you go to this competition, it may feel heavier or lighter, even though by hard weight it's totally different. So just having the full skill set of being able to move quickly or slower with a heavy weight is just worth it all the time. Because again, too, there might be some days you wake up and have all the energy in the world, and there might be some other days when you have zero energy. So that could obviously affect you all sorts of ways. If you only train, for the heavy stuff, like you're screwed, right?
That makes perfect sense. With when it comes to like training strongman, like for its own sake, I'm curious, like, do you guys like seek out variability in the equipment as like a practice to try to make yourself kind of like immune to the novelty of new stuff? Like you're like, oh, I'm just gonna like find another gym and lift their Atlas stone or play around with their yoke or like put a pad under your shoulder, like just doing things to make the weight feel different because you know that when you get to the competition, it's not going to be the same.
It depends on the competition. Just depends on what's coming up and what's ahead of you. So what I'm training for right now, I have pretty high certainty in 5 of the 6 events, almost exactly what that's going to feel like. But the
Yeah.
sixth event is a natural stone lifting event, and I got nobody really knows for sure what those are going to feel like. So I literally went to my friend's landscaping business. He's got this huge rock pit that he uses to take and put on people's homes and properties. And I just will go and mess around and pick up different shaped ones that are different weights for 15 to 20 minutes because who knows? But like, so
Yeah,
it
yeah.
just sort of depends. But like, I'm doing a little bit of both. Like I said, 5 of 6, I have a pretty certain idea what that's going to feel like. And then the sixth is like, who
You're
knows?
like, I don't know what kind of rock this is.
Right. They're actually they're special made this year. They're really cool. However, this guy made them, they're like special made fabricated rocks where this guy cut them out and they're plate loaded. So for the different weight classes,
Oh
like
wow.
they're all certain shape, and then they will add more weight inside of them somehow.
That's pretty cool.
Preceding classes, yeah, I don't know exactly how they'll look yet, but pretty neat.
That's pretty interesting. What would you say like can you take us through like some of the, mistakes that maybe you've made or people you've trained made? Like what are like maybe the top 3 like just things people get totally wrong when they first start training for strongman?
This is a good rule, I think, for most training in general, is that you want most of your training to be done really in like the 60 to 80% range.
Yeah.
That I don't think that is special to just strength training, right? When you're rolling and doing drills
Yes.
to get the technique and to get the intention, very important. You need to be working at a zone that allows that, and that goes in hand with building a really big base. You should spend most of your time kind of building the engine, building your technique, building your foundation. Then it's big base, high peak. When you do that right, and then accumulation phase, which is just again accumulating all the skills, all the conditioning, all the assets you need physically, then you will be able to ramp up very hard, very quickly, and very safely to your body. So to answer your question, spend a lot of time in this foundational accumulation stage. Even when you are a more advanced person, your just base is now much higher than where it
Yeah.
was, but it is the same concept.
What would the elements be of that base? Like I'm just curious because like in terms of combat sports, like we often talk about like an aerobic base being like really important, and then like sometimes people will even talk about like having a base of like muscle mass just to like protect your body from like like it's like almost like armor, like you have a little bit more mass. It's a little bit cushier when you get hit. It's a little bit it protects you from certain kinds of injuries. But I'm curious what in this context specifically, like what does this accumulation phase training really look like?
It is similar to what you just said. A lot of it is preventative to avoid getting injuries when you are ramping up for competition. So, individual to individual, what like movement patterns do you need to correct and work on? And in strongman, a lot of times this is a muscle activation thing. A lot of people get one of the most common problems is upper traps get overactive in all forms of lifting. It's a very easy thing that happens, but to stabilize overhead, you need your low and mid traps to work really, really hard, right? Just to
Yeah,
get better shoulder extension. So a lot of people in strongman need to spend a lot of time doing some kind of corrective stuff for that. Most strongmen have pretty poor mobility and range of motion relatively, so you need to spend some time like in there and then conditioning both for your cardio and aerobic system, but also, as they would call it, general physical preparedness with anaerobic work too. When I set up for like a really, really big deadlift top single, if it's a max weight at a competition, we'll start with a couple weeks of 5 sets of 10, and then work our way up to that. But thinking about what that does, it's an endurance thing, but it's also a technical practice thing because if I'm doing
yeah,
50 reps, that's 50 working rep opportunities to have flawless technique.
yeah,
You know,
totally. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, it's interesting. Like people, I mean, I think I discounted this for a long time, but and I'm sure it's the same with strongman as it is with like your bench, squat, deadlift type stuff. But a lot of being successful with these lifts is like coordination and technique, like learning to coordinate the right firing sequence and the right movement with your muscles to get the to move the weight effectively. And I notice sometimes like I'll see people who are like way smaller than me lift way more than me, and I'm like, how do you do that with like less mass? Like I'm like, you don't like I like you weigh like 160 pounds and I weigh 215 pounds. Like how are you doing that? And I realized like, there's an aspect to this stuff, like sure, strength and nervous system recruitment and that type of stuff, but there's also like a huge coordination aspect, especially with these movements that are like what I would call serial, where like, you always squat the same way. Like there's an optimal way of squatting, for your body and a certain weight. There's not like 100 different ways to squat a barbell. You know what I mean? Like whereas like with jujitsu or combat sports, there's an infinite number of possibilities of how you could win a match. So it's like more of a complex motor task versus like what I would call like a serial one.
right, right, yeah, it's nervous system technique, and as you get stronger, the more you want to lift, the more important. Let's put it a different way. Every centimeter off and out of position you are, it's 100-fold the difference.
Yeah.
If
No,
you're
that makes
warming up
perfect
and
sense. I mean, you
right,
got a big heavy log over your head and you make a little technical error, you're gonna feel it. Whereas, if it's light, you could probably get away with that.
100%. Right, exactly. We have these logs coming up in our next competition that are so I'm in the lightweight division for strongman. I'm in the smallest weight class there is, but we still will use what they call the monster logs, and they're 12 inches in the middle, like most are. But then they have big end caps that are made to fit 45-pound plates because they are heavy duty for the big boys, and because they're so big on in every way, just a little bit being off centered is throwing you off so much more, because they're
Yeah.
not only longer than normal, but again, the ends themselves have a bigger diameter. So just, thinking about gravity and how much a little shift here or there is going to make a difference. It's a huge, huge difference versus most other 12-inch logs that you're going to come across.
It makes perfect sense. It's interesting too, like because like when you're talking about this stuff, I really do like feel like there's so much, in terms of like I've kind of reorganized the way that I look at strength training pretty recently. I spent, like I said, a while doing like really heavy barbell work, and I had a match. I think it was in June against somebody who was a lot bigger than me. Like they were probably about like 280 pounds. And I don't think they were like in particularly good shape or anything, but I really struggled to move them around. And at that time, which I think I've probably lost some strength a little bit because I had a few injuries and I haven't been able to lift as heavy. But like I was deadlifting like 495 and benching 315, like I felt like I was really strong and I couldn't move this guy at all. And I'm like, how is it that I can bench 315 and deadlift 495, but I can't move this person who's like maybe 300 pounds. And I just realized that like the vectors and the angles, obviously there's a resistance component, but I just felt like the stuff that I was doing in the gym wasn't it wasn't close enough to what I'm doing in my sport. And when you talk about some of these strongman events and like what it's like lifting the weight, it really reminds me of. It seems much closer to dealing with a body. I know you have like we met maybe like 2.5 years ago at a sumo competition. Do you feel like maybe the strongman stuff has a little bit more transfer to that type of thing, or not? Maybe I'm really like open to hearing your opinion on this because I know a lot of people have this approach of like sport specific is bullshit, and I kind of was that way, and I'm sort of like sliding away from feeling that way now. So I'm curious what you think.
Strongman training is functional strength training taken to an extreme, right? So
Yeah.
think about our foundational elements. You have to be able to pick up weight off the ground. You have to be able to lift it up to a high level or press it overhead. You have to push things away from you. You have to pull things towards you. You have to carry heavy things. So what we're trying to do in strongman is just max those out to a truly extreme, excessive degree. But when you're breaking down all of foundational human movements, uh, it scales all the way back. So, you look at what most people who would call themselves functional trainers, right? What are they doing with people of all levels and demographics? Farmers walks, some sort of deadlift, right? Some sort of overhead pressing, some sort of core stability, right? So, yes, strongman training is, I think, a really good complement to grappling and martial arts, jujitsu, sumo, because it just teaches you how to move in a proper way. Like shouldering a sandbag is it is exactly a suplex. It is hip extension, like
Yeah.
purest form. You know what I
It's
mean?
so much like, I mean, that's how I feel, and it's like there's not it's unfortunately there's not a lot of good research that's been done on how strength training can transfer to in sport performance. I think it's a really hard thing to study, like when you look at the way you would have to set up these studies is because you could have somebody who makes an improvement in the gym and the improvement could be technical, like they get a coach who's really good at maybe they get you and you're helping them do the sandbag work. And now all of a sudden they're lifting more weight with the sandbag, not necessarily because they got stronger, but because their technique got better. And then you have the opposite scenario where maybe they're working with a really good jujitsu coach and that coach improves their jujitsu technique. Now they're performing better in jujitsu because they got better at jujitsu. So when you have all of these factors all in play at the same time, I find that it's really hard to look at a study of, let's say there's been some studies that show that like squatting improves your running speed for sprinters, right? That's something that's been studied a little bit. But ultimately, we can't really know if they got better because of the squats. Like they could have gotten better because they got better at running, it,
Or they have overall more confidence. It could be a
yes.
mental thing.
Yeah, totally. So like there's all these factors. So it's really hard to study this stuff. So I've kind of gotten a little bit away from needing it to be researched and more just kind of, it sounds crazy, but like kind of trusting my intuition and my gut about this stuff, which is that the movement pattern does matter. So the fact that taking a sandbag and shouldering it feels exactly like a suplex, I'm so much more confident in the idea that that's going to transfer to what I'm doing in a match, as opposed to say a deadlift. Which it's not saying I still do deadlifts and I like deadlifts and I think they have a purpose and a role, but I don't see that transferring as much in that particular example, you know?
Right, right. And then think too, if we were to frame it as powerlifting style lifting, there's things like a bench press and even deadlifts and squats to a point that you can gimmick a little bit to move a lot of weight.
Yes.
So if you can picture what a really big arch in the back and a really wide grip could do on a bench press, you can bench a lot with that technique, but you cannot do that in really any of these strongman movements. You cannot gimmick a sandbag pickup. You cannot gimmick a heavy yoke carry
Yes.
the same way.
Yeah,
So
I feel like the strongman implements are almost chosen for the fact that they negate that.
there are
So you get
many that in particular are ridiculous and very hard on purpose. Yeah.
like the Atlas stone is a good example, right? So it's a deadlift. You're deadlifting the Atlas stone in many cases, or unless you're shouldering it or whatever. But you got to pick this rock up, and it has nowhere to grip
Right.
it, right? As opposed to a barbell, which is built by humans to be inherently grippable. You know, is that
Right.
this is a graspable. It's a bar. Like we're gonna put the weights on the end. It's so easy to pick up. I can pick up a lot more with a barbell than I can with an Atlas stone. So I just see the transfer, especially for combat sports, to just be higher with this type of thing. It just makes more sense intuitively to me.
Yeah. Barbell is almost always, I don't want to say perfect, but predictable in how you
Yeah.
hold and grab it. And what's cool, you asked about variability and stuff, and there is a big variety of, uh, let's say me and you have a 250-pound sandbag. Mine could be a lot more dense than yours as far as how it's filled. Yours could be a different shape. So, when you have more experience with these things, you have to just literally hold your wrists and your hands in a little slightly different way. And, as you get more deeper into these things, there's all these different ways that you can learn to pick up the same sandbag over and over and over and over again. So thinking about, again, comparing to uh, any sort of martial art, you may have one move that you drill over and over and over and over again, but you come across 10 different people, you're going to hit it slightly differently on them.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Your grips are going to change the way you hold them. Like if I'm body locking somebody who's smaller than me, I might take a butterfly grip. But if you're really big, I'm going to be like using my tips of my fingers on that S grip trying to hang on to you. It's
Right. But when we boil it down, the fundamental and the idea and the theory is still correct. It's just like a totally different application. And that's, something that I've had people do before when they need to learn how to pick up sandbags real fast. Or there's a natural stone event at Florida Strongest Man this past year in January. And one of my clients only had like a couple sandbags at home. And so I gave him a drill. It was just every minute on the minute, you need to just pick this up a completely different way. Get
yeah.
creative, like whatever. Like you have to pick it up, try and shoulder it, or at least get it to your chest. And even if it's totally stupid, pick it up somehow, some way that's different because you don't really know what to expect.
No,
Right?
that's a
Like,
great training method because that gets into like what something we've used in martial arts. It comes from like ecological dynamics is the differential learning. So you
yeah,
just create variability for the sake of variability in a task in order to basically, you're trying to induce learning ultimately.
right.
It's like I want you to learn which way worked the best for you. Um, and also build strength in different planes and approaches, right? I think this is one of the things that's actually quite tricky with strength training is that we're both looking for like learning, right? Like you want to learn and get more skilled at the task, but there's also this element of like tissue development. Like we're looking to make ourselves to change our bodies. So it's like you almost kind of have to play to both sides of that where I want to get as skilled as possible at this movement, but I also want to how do you say, I want to I want my body to adapt as well. I think that can be tricky. Whereas like with something like jujitsu, sure, there is some adaptation of the body, but a lot of what goes on is just pure learning. Like we just need to get better at jujitsu. We don't need to change our body.
Right.
That happens in the weight room.
Right. Right. And then that comes back to the importance of long-term development and long-term planning, because you can look at a big macro cycle over 6 to 9 to 12 months, and now you can figure out how you can fit in all of these different pieces that you're going to need in a year's time without overloading or overlapping and like confusing yourself in the worst ways, and still be able to develop these things one after the other in a logical sense.
How do you deal with this? Is something I think also strongman has in common with martial arts, especially jujitsu, is like how do you deal with the frequency of competition? Because it seems like there's probably more strongman events, especially if you start traveling a little bit. Like there's more strongman events than you could possibly do, right?
I feel the same about jujitsu. Funny enough,
Yeah.
wow,
No,
there's so many of these.
there's more jujitsu competitions than you could ever do. You're never gonna compete in all of them. And a lot of times, at least for me, I see them as opportunities, and you never know. You can take a guess, like, you're probably going to get more opportunity out of winning ADCC trials than some local thing, but sometimes the opportunities are different, right? Like we have IBJJF Pans coming up next week, and I'm going to do it, but ultimately for me, I don't, it sounds stupid, but I don't really love Pans because I got to pay like $200 to compete in Pans, and I can't possibly win anything money wise, right? But if I go to a Naga that's 2 weeks later and I do the absolute division, I could win $1,000. So it's like there's kind of different opportunities. Like, yeah, sure, there's this prestige of winning Pans, but then there's also like I could use $1,000 in my pocket. I kind of want to go do that Naga. So sometimes I end up just competing really often because I don't want to miss any of those opportunities. But I'm just wondering because you have to sort of adjust your training. And I actually try not to adjust my training that much because of how often I compete. But you
Okay.
have to make adjustments in order to be at 100% when you're competing. So I'm curious, like when you look at these big long cycles of training, how do you manage that relative to competing often, or do you decide not to compete so often so you don't have to deal with that? What's kind of your approach there?
Well, I'll start with just saying where I personally have been over the last couple of years, because it's obviously very individual as it would be for jujitsu. But this year, I mean, my goal is worlds, right? And that is November this year. It was December last year. It was December the year before. So I've kind of scheduled things around that. Um, so let's just start this in 2022. Actually, I was at a point where I just felt like I needed a lot of competition experience. So, like you were saying, I didn't really adjust my training much at all, but I did 10 different competitions of different styles, even Highland Games. That was when I also did a sumo tournament with you, and like all these other things, just so I could just get live rounds, competition experience to get the nerves out of me, be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And that's what I think a lot of people who are serious about competing need to do early on, is
Yes.
not really be specific about, okay, it's my second competition and I'm going to do the most insane specific 6 to 8, 12 week prep for this. Nope.
No.
Nope. You need to get out there, get the nerves out, like understand how you individually react to prepping for a competition. How do you feel the night before? What foods work really well for you on game day? How did you feel after? Getting all of those things out of the way and building that experience resume, if you want to call it that, is so critical. But when I did those 10 competitions, I did not train directly for 9 of them. One of them was a
Yeah.
powerlifting meet, which I did have a little more specificity to at the very end of the year. Otherwise, no. So then after that, I was like, okay, I'm ready to take it up a notch. And my goal was world. So I did a online qualifier for that. I did one competition as a sort of tune up, but it was really, my goal was to get to the highest level. And then I did okay. I finished 19th. Then after that, it was very clear that I did not have enough experience against very good people, because now we're talking a different game. This is not just like competition experience. This is competition experience against people that are going to step on your throat if you are not ready.
High level competition
Oh,
experience.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So then I set out what's like a reasonable approach. So I did four total competitions the following year. This would have been 2024. It was a big regional comp, nationals comp for one of the feds, another regionals that was a qualifier for worlds, and then worlds. So by the time I went back around, I had those three that were all very challenging, very elite competition, and just getting used to the pace was totally different. You know,
Yeah.
as it goes, you try things, you learn things, you understand more about yourself every time you go, and even if you execute it to the highest degree, like there's just something that you can learn from every time. You know?
Yep.
And then this past year, because I'm now at a more elite level, I did one just kind of for fun competition to keep my competitive gears up. I
Yep.
competed in America's Strongest Man. Again, very high level. That's the highest level domestic competition that I can do. So it's the same idea of I need to keep being in these situations against the very best. And now I'm gearing for worlds. So that's,
That's cool.
yeah,
No,
to
I like this a lot. It really reminds me of martial arts training, jujitsu and stuff. Like, so kind of what I'm hearing is almost like initially when you're a novice, right? We gotta expose ourselves to the thing that we want to be good at, and this is almost what I would call like a phase where it's like competition as training. Like the
yeah,
competitions
100%.
are training, right? And then after that, you kind of like it seems like you kind of alternate, and this makes a lot of sense between those blocks of having competitions serving the purpose of being like a training environment and getting used to these competitions, whether it's just getting used to competition in general at the novice level or getting used to competing at a higher level and getting a taste and a feel for that, right? You alternate between that and then giving yourself, it sounds like almost a year of where you're having a larger plan to raise your level to compete at a specific event. So, like kind of like period where you're competing more often, using it as sort of like a training block. And then you're like, okay, now I'm going to focus in on this one particular competition. And you might do a few competitions in the meantime just to keep yourself acclimated to it because competing is a skill and all skills in my eyes are perishable. So if we don't re-expose ourselves to the environment, the nerves will come back.
For sure. Yeah, 100%. And the competition gets better every year, as I find out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, especially Strongman is growing so explosively. Is wow. I mean, 5 years ago, it was not even close to how good it is now. No disrespect to anybody back then, but like,
No, no, no. That I mean, jujitsu is the same way. It's constantly evolving and getting better. The levels going up. I mean, in things that are popular, I think this is what happens.
for sure, with everything, every sport you could possibly do. So yeah, it's one more thing I was gonna say about competing as far as me is I don't really like to do well, future going forward is now I'm sort of thinking about like what are some really cool fun ones that I want to do. The last like 2.5 years has been like real serious, and I am going to continue to pursue worlds, America's Strongest Man, this and that. But as general advice, the reason I want to say this is you have to make sure that you're having some fun
Yeah.
way. Like there are some competitions I will definitely go out of my way for because I get to go flip a car, sick. You know,
Yes.
even if it's not, it's backyard.
Totally.
So much fun sometimes. They're a blast, and there's something like so raw about what strongman really is that some of these smaller local shows, like I love it. It's not. So that's that. I mean, I really like. I'm thinking like, okay, what's some fun ones I can just go do and
Well, I
enjoy.
think that's also another that's like another quality that you gotta nurture in yourself is like I always like to think about this like from the art standpoint because like martial arts, like there's like you have like an inner artist, an inner child, you know what I mean? But I think it's true with anything that you have to like nurture and protect your passion for what it is that you're doing. So
Right.
seeking out those things that are fun, for me, it can take a lot of different forms. Like I'll do a lot of weird stuff. Like this year for me, um, I really like Ed Calderon. I don't know if you know
Yeah.
who that
Yeah.
is. Like I'm like super into that. And, like I just really enjoy it. It's not what I do day to day. But I just find that stuff fascinating. And I saw that he's doing like a workshop in Staten Island. I was like, oh, I gotta do this. And like as soon
Cool.
as I like signed up and like got it all squared away, I was like, oh yeah, like this is like now I'm really excited to do jujitsu. I'm excited to do sumo. I'm excited to do everything. Like it just raises your motivation. I think people make a mistake sometimes because like motivation and excitement and focus and all these mental qualities, they're more nebulous and they're less like physical. It's harder to get at than like understanding how fatigued you are, but
Right.
these things are just as important to like almost like train. Like like when you do those fun competitions, it's like you're training your motivation. You're getting yourself hyped up and reminding yourself like how much you love this thing. And I think that it's actually so important, and it's been such a big part of what I feel like I've been successful with is doing that and being able to sustain ridiculously high volumes of training for really long periods of time because I'm so jazzed about it.
Absolutely. It's super important. And people often get pigeonholed into one path, or even worse, an identity of who they are is what they're doing. And even if you're in, you could look at a niche and think that jujitsu is a sharp niche, but like you have to remember all these elements that you can bring into it. You can do
Yeah.
judo in jujitsu, you can do sumo, you can do wrestling, you can do all these things in there. And that's what I really like about strongman is when strongman is done at its best, you have elements of pure athletic training like sprints and jumps. You have elements of Olympic weightlifting. You have elements of bodybuilding because you have to have a certain level of muscle mass on you. There are elements of Highland Games because you have to throw things.
Yeah.
So, thinking about it in that scope, and going back to having fun, if I could just go do a Highland Games for the heck of it because it's like super cool and something different, but also again, we've talked about this novelty and learning, having all those things and thinking about these individual aspects, I think gets people to detach from putting so much stress and importance about really things that they shouldn't be so stressed about.
Yeah. No, 100%. I one of the things you said there about the identity, that's like a long time ago, maybe like I still lived in Florida, so it had to be like 4 years ago or so. I was going through this mental training app that no longer exists, unfortunately, but it came from George Mumford, who was one of Michael Jordan's mental coaches. And he had this thing that he would talk about where it's like, you know, I am not, you would say like I am someone who chooses to compete in this, right? Like you don't identify yourself with the thing. You have to put your identity like a step back from that and realize that you're somebody who chooses to compete in strongman, or you're somebody who chooses to compete in jujitsu, or who chooses to compete in basketball, and that this you're not necessarily just a strongman. You're not just a basketball player. I'm not just someone who does jujitsu. I have an identity that's wider and beyond that. And this really helps with um, being compassionate enough with yourself to deal with when you fall short of the outcomes that you want. And I think that sets you up to be more analytical and understand what happened and be able to grow more from that versus somebody who their identity gets shattered when they're not able to achieve the outcome that they want because they're so close to that. Like they really believe like that's who they are, and it's just layered on that way, and it ends up being devastating. I mean, I've seen a lot of these people just quit. We were just talking about a guy who used to be really popular on YouTube, and I was like, what happened to him? I never see him anymore. And somebody was telling me like, oh, like he broke his shin, and like after he broke his shin, like he just lost his drive. And I've had some really bad injuries. Like I broke my neck. I couldn't like lift my arm for a while. I've messed up my ankles, my wrists. Like I've had a ton of pretty bad injuries that probably would put most people out, but I never I just never think of it that way. Like there's always this like flexibility in my view. Like even if something really bad happens and I'm sidelined, even I can't really train the way I want for months. I'll train differently. I'll do
Yes,
other things, and also one of the things I think that helps me there is having like a strong meditation practice. Like I'm pretty into that, and if I can't train physically, then I'll be like, all right, well, we're just gonna take some time and really work on the mind for this block. So I think what you said there was really insightful about the identity, and then also the point about the novelty is good too, and that's something that I've benefited a lot from it in the martial arts context is like learning things from sumo or shuai jiao or whatever, and then or aikido, and then that stuff coming in and working for me really well in jujitsu. And I'm sure something similar can happen in strongman. Like maybe you're
all
doing one of those little meets, and instead of having a really heavy sandbag, they give you a really light sandbag, and you're supposed to throw it. And you're like, hey, I bet if I did this once or twice a week where I'm tossing this thing, I'd have a lot more power when I'm picking up the heavy one. Like sometimes those things are insightful for training or even for when you're competing. You never know when one of those events is going to show up, right? Like,
for sure. And one thing that's really cool is, and this is one of the events coming up in November, is the frame carry. So big wooden timber frame with handles on the side. We have, I think it's 600 pounds for 50 feet down and back. I learned this from bouldering, from rock climbing, dude, is that actually having like a lot of caffeine and like high adrenaline, whether it's again through like an energy drink, a pre-workout, or just created in your mind, actually weakens and reduces your grip strength.
yeah.
I learned that from climbing because I would work out at the gym, I'd have something, and I would just try that for climbing. My just grip was just totally wrecked. But when I learned how to relax and like get focused in the right way without that artificial stimulation, my grip was so much stronger. So I know getting ready for that frame carry event, that's a moment when I'm not going to, I'll have like a little bit, maybe like an espresso or something, just like enough
Yes.
to just get me up a little bit, but
No,
not
the right amount. Yeah.
red line zone, because there are other events that I know, like deadlifts are one or yoke carries are another one for me, where I know that I can be at this red line level and still perform very well. But it's just
Yes.
knowing when and where to like pick those spots. But that's again from the diversity. I learned that from bouldering of all things.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting because this happens to me all the time where I had this thing recently where I was looking at these like old sword manuals, and I was like, this actually makes so much this like it really helped me with my wrestling, because when people are blocking me from moving towards them, their arms are functioning like a spear or a sword, and like if I can like cut their arm out of the way, then I can get to their body. So
Yeah.
I'm huge on that. Like I always see these things in other places. It's funny too, like Gordon Ryan was making some jokes about his coach John Danaher, and he's like, yeah, John will just be like, we'll be in the airport, and he's just watching some old black and white like boxing match, and he's like, and Gordon's like, what are you doing? Like, we don't even do boxing. Like, why are you watching this? And he's just constantly studying these like obscure matches between people. Like, all he does is just sit around and watch film. But there's so much to be learned through that. I mean, in one of the DVDs that I have from him, it's on the Americano, which is like a shoulder lock, and the first like 40 minutes is him talking about the sport of arm wrestling and like how people's arms get broken in arm wrestling, and that
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
position of external rotation is very powerful for breaking the arm. And I'm
Yes.
like, dude, like when did you study arm wrestling?
You know what? The first time, I think it was his first appearance, Donaher's on Joe Rogan. The first 20 minutes is him talking about javelin. And
Yes,
yeah,
yes. He's
right,
like,
okay,
javelin would
right.
be really boring if they did it from their knees. And it's
Right,
like,
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's like so interesting. But I think this speaks to what we're like talking about, where it's like you can like the right amount of variability. Everyone know, like everybody knows they need specificity. I mean, I would hope that everybody knows they need that in order to progress, right? Like you have to focus on the thing you want to get better
For
on. That's
sure.
obvious. We're talking about once you've got that squared away, right? this introduction of a little bit of variability can really take you to the next level and also give you a mental break from the stress of just being in that thing all the time that you're doing, and also maybe you learn some things that you can take with you into other aspects of what you're doing.
It's like learning an instrument. If you want to be a sick guitar player, you have to learn all the chords, and then you can kind of understand like how music theory works and put your own spin on it then.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's so true. Oh man. Well, I really appreciate you doing this, man. This was a great conversation. We'll have to circle back and do another one, because another thing that I really want to pick your brain about is like nutrition, because you post some really good nutrition information. I remember I hit you up a few months ago, or maybe a couple of years ago, because you had posted some information about like making your own electrolyte drink.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
that was really helpful, because I think so many of these there's so many products out there, right? And products have to be marketed and they have to taste good, and there's all these stipulations that stop them from being just purely performance enhancing. And you were like, nah man, like we're just going to make our own electrolyte drink. These are the right amounts of the right things, and you just mix it together, and guess what, it's way cheaper too.
It's like a tenth or maybe a 20th of the cost. It's crazy.
It's wild. Well, thanks again for coming on, doing this. This was a phenomenal conversation. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot, and thank you.
You got it, man. And I hope you don't mind. I'm going to plug, if anybody wants to learn about strongman training, I have a free online strongman community. It is clubstrongman.com.
Yeah,
Get
get on
everything
there.
in there.
I'll put a link too in the video description, so people can just click it and go straight to it.
Awesome. I appreciate you, brother. Yeah, I enjoyed this. Great conversation.
Thank you, man.